Hi, everybody. Welcome to the HR Roundtable. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm Patricia Trudeau, and very excited today to welcome our consultant, Caitlin Madison. And I apologize if I said that incorrectly, Caitlin. Very excited to have Caitlin here to really help us with an area that from HR's perspective, I think a lot of us have been struggling and had some challenges with on how companies can support mental and emotional wellness of a multi-generational workforce. And not only we're doing this in an environment that is so completely different, I think, than what a lot of us had been used to. We changed to remote and are now going back for some to hybrid, some that are staying remote, and some that are back completely in the office. Now, Caitlin is a licensed clinical professional counselor. She's nationally certified counselor, and she's a certified coach in private practice, serving clients in the DC metro region and remotely around the world. Caitlin integrates her specialties of mental health counseling and coaching as she works with clients navigating life transitions to gain clarity and confidence in reaching their goals. She previously worked as the Assistant Director of Coaching and Education at the Johns Hopkins Carey Business School and currently coaches executive leaders through Hopkins Academy for Women and Leadership and the Academy for Healthcare Leadership Management. Caitlin is certified in the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, StrengthsFinder, EQI 2.0, and EQ 360 with a career management certificate from the academies. She has presented at companies across various industries to include a Fortune 500 company, as well as local and national career development conferences. Caitlin holds a BA in corporate communications from Elon University and a master's in mental health counseling from Johns Hopkins University. Caitlin, let me turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you. I think it just said the recording. Oh, there goes the recording. Great. Well, it's wonderful to be with all of you. I am based right now today in Arizona, but based usually in Bethesda, Maryland. So I am glad to be connected to the DMV area. I'm going to share my screen here and we'll jump right in. Now, I'm going to ask for some participation today. I really hope that you take something away that will be helpful to you personally, to your organization. But we're going to be talking about how companies can support mental and emotional wellness of a multi-generational workforce. We've collectively been through something, several different things over the last couple of years, and that's affected different generations. And so I think it's really important to keep that in mind. I'll be sharing some statistics and research along as additional resources and other links in the appendix. But just to start, I recognize that you may be coming from different spaces. So I just want to give you an opportunity to use your breath as an anchor and as a grounding tool. You may do meditation or some breathing exercises to help you create stillness, but sometimes when we're rushing around, it's hard to be present. So I'm going to guide you through a 1-minute breathing exercise. If you feel comfortable, you can close your eyes, or you can have a soft gaze downward or somewhere in the room. I'm going to close my eyes with you as well. And as you close your eyes and just get comfortable in your chair, I want you to take a nice deep inhale through your nose. And at the top, just pause and hold that breath. And then exhale through your mouth. And do that again, just gently inhaling fresh air in, hold at the top, and exhale through your mouth, letting go anything that is not serving you. Continue to gently breathe, inhaling through your nose, pausing at the top and holding, and exhaling through your mouth, letting anything go, perhaps a meeting or conversation before our meeting today, to allow yourself just to be centered and present here. Perhaps you notice your feet on the floor, your back on your chair, and just continue to gently breathe Inhaling through your nose and exhaling through your mouth. And when you feel ready, you can come back to the room and you can open your eyes. And I'd love to hear just in the chat box what you noticed as you just breathed for that last maybe 60 seconds. Feeling calmer, relaxation. Yeah. Feeling centered. Yeah, it's so powerful, more relaxed. Deep breathing does have a calming effect. Yeah, we always have our breath with us. And sometimes we're holding it or we're holding tension in our shoulders, clenching our jaw. So even just taking 60 seconds can really lighten something. Maybe you notice you were holding tension in your neck and now it's released a little bit. So, and I've included some apps and, other resources for guided breathing exercises, but hopefully you feel a little bit more present for our time together. As Patricia introduced me, I have the privilege of working with individual clients in both therapy and coaching, and provide some wellness programming for companies. And I really love this work, and it's more important now than ever, perhaps, where people are really kind of waking up to what's most important in life and how can I feel less stress? How can I live a life that's more in alignment with my values? How can I be a leader that's aware of people and how they're doing? So we'll be talking about a lot of different topics today. Like I mentioned, I've worked with several companies, especially in the last year, who have really wanted more of this mental health conversation and around well-being and how do more emotionally intelligent leaders better support their employees. I was reading an article this morning from Forbes that said 92% of employees said that they would be more likely to stay with their job if their bosses showed more empathy. And productivity metrics confirm this. Leaders who manage their employees with empathy see 21% higher productivity on average. So, as we're going through lots of different transitions, whether it's coming back to the office or a hybrid schedule, we need leaders who are emotionally intelligent, because workplace stress is a big part of why people leave or make changes. So I just love to hear who's in the room. There are a lot of people here, but if you could just tap or chat in the chat box, what you hope to learn today. You're welcome to put your name and what organization you work for. I'm wondering if you all know each other, or maybe you can meet someone today and we'll do a breakout room. But I'd love to just hear, what do you hope to learn today if this went well? How to motivate a millennial who is happy but not challenged. Okay, that's a good question. How to better diffuse anxiety in others. Bringing wellness into the telework equation. Today is our first day back in the office after being gone. Ooh, they're coming in fast. For 2 years, so I want to help staff transition, diverse tools to manage the needs of a multi-generational workforce, ways to improve employee culture, how to keep team engagement, doing what resources might my organization not be doing that we should, how to engage employees who are returning to work in a hybrid environment. These are great. Learn how to promote well-being across multiple hybrid sites without having direct contact as an HR professional, and addressing challenges for those who struggle with mental health. These are all great, and they continue to come in, and I hope I didn't miss any, but it sounds like there's a lot of consistent themes here, and I think we'll touch on many of these topics, and I'll open it for questions at the end if I missed one of them. So yes, we're going to be talking about, what you can do as an HR leader. I think it's really important to remember that you can't and are not responsible for all of this, right? You cannot be everyone's therapist, and people have to take responsibility and ownership. I do think, though, that there are ways and programming that companies can put in place to show employees that this conversation is important and that they're going to take care of their people. So we're going to talk about some of these topics around the multi-generational workforce and their experiences, how the brain works, and stress. So you may learn things for your organization, but yourself as well. What are some of the common ways that mental health issues can present as performance issues in employees? We'll talk about some cases of different companies and what they are doing currently in their space around this topic. And hopefully there'll be something that you can take and implement not too long in the distant future in your organization. So here are some statistics from a Forbes article in 2021, some relevant statistics that mental health conditions cost employers over $100 billion and over 200 million lost workdays every year. And 93% of managers report employee mental health has negative impact on the bottom line. 80% of managers feel ill-equipped to address mental health concerns. And 44% of managers rate their team's mental health as less than healthy. Why do you think there's this connection to the bottom line? I'd love to hear in the chat box. And do these statistics surprise you? Not surprised. If employees are out, then productivity is down. Exactly. So there's a really big correlation here. Here's another article from the Harvard Business Review last year. Even before the pandemic, people struggled with their mental health. We don't talk about mental health as much. We may be okay saying, I broke my arm and I have a cast on it and people want to know the story, right? But we don't really see our brains. And the idea of saying, today I was feeling really down and depressed and it was hard for me to get out of bed. That's not the usual conversation that we feel really open to talking about, right? But the reality is that up to 80% of people will experience a diagnosable mental health condition over the course of their lifetime, whether they know it or not. And some may impact functioning more than others, but the prevalence of symptoms is the same from the C-suite to individual contributors. But almost 60% of employees have never spoken to anyone at work about their mental health status. You're welcome to put in the chat box if you think there are specific reasons of why, but we have still some stigma. We have a little ways to go to having these open conversations to normalize talking about how our brain is functioning and how we're feeling. So even though managers, direct reports, and colleagues have been more vulnerable than ever due to our shared societal challenges, and the blurring of the professional and personal during the past 18 months, the effects of stigma can still loom large. I think we're collectively having more conversations. I think it's hard to find someone who's saying, if you ask, how are you doing? Someone's like, oh, I don't have a care in the world. I think we can all acknowledge, yeah, there have been some difficult things over the last couple of years. So we're starting to normalize it, but I think there's still opportunity ahead of us. Here's a survey from Aetna's Health Pulse in 2021 on different generations. You can see young adults are very concerned, more concerned about their mental health than other ages here. And we'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's interesting to think about how do you support different generations in the workforce, and who's going to be open to these conversations and want to have them more. Maybe millennials, maybe Gen Z, and maybe who might not feel as comfortable, who haven't traditionally had these conversations in the workplace. So where are there gaps and opportunities to educate so that these groups can work well together and find support? And obviously there's been an impact for all of you in HR. This is coming from a report from the Pulse of HR report, which gathered data from 1,000 US HR professionals. And they found that 98% of HR leaders said that the pandemic had transformed their role, and 70% said that this past year has been one of the most stressful of their careers. I'm going to guess probably not surprising for all of you. Another report found that 77.3% of HR professionals surveyed reported experiencing burnout during the pandemic, an increase from 59.6% in February 2020. So, and how difficult is that when you're the one who's supporting your organization? And maybe there's a sense you have to hold it together, but you may be experiencing burnout and stress as every other human alongside of you. So I want to give you an opportunity, and Patricia's going to use the breakout room feature. I want you to just take, maybe we'll do, let me just see here, maybe like 4 minutes. It'll be a quick conversation. How has the last 2 years changed your role in HR? You'll be paired in no more than threes. There may be a couple that have 2, but just take a moment and you can join. And if you're not assigned, just stay here and we'll get you assigned.
Everybody should have received an invite.
This meeting is being recorded.
All right, welcome back. We'll wait another 20 seconds for everybody else to arrive. And I'd love for you to start to think about what were some of the things that came up. I'd love to hear in the chat box. All right, I think we've got everybody back. Hopefully you had some good conversations. Maybe you met someone new. I'd love to hear in the chat box, what came up in your conversation? How has your role changed in the last couple of years? How not seeing people in person means you don't have a pulse on what's going on with them, inability to keep a solid pulse on employee morale in a virtual environment. That was shared in our room. Managing COVID, which adds a lot of complexity, being responsible for all COVID related issues. Yeah, I didn't have a lot of prep time for that. Keeping a remote work environment, keeping teams engaged, communicating effectively remotely, more spent counseling employees. Yep, on professional and personal challenges, multiple additions to role related to COVID, medical and religious exemptions, productivity of office staff. Do we continue wearing masks? Yep, I feel challenged physically, mentally, and morally more than ever. Yes, so many good points. And I see that they continue to roll in here, but a lot of changes, and you've done a lot to pivot, and it hasn't been easy. So, and as was mentioned, it's taken a toll. And so I think validating and normalizing that is so important. When you recognize you're human, it gives other people permission to be human too. So the goal is not that you're going to feel happy all the time, or that your employees will feel happy all the time, but that they will have a sense of overall psychological and emotional well-being, which, defined by the World Health Organization, is that each person realizes their own abilities, can cope with normal stresses of life, and can work productively and able to make a contribution to their community. So it's really important to acknowledge that we will have stressors, and hopefully not as big of the ones that we've had in the last couple of years, but how can we tolerate discomfort in healthy ways and continue to live and contribute. Now, again, this topic is not just for the pandemic experience, although it's heightened our mental health issues. But there are several causes of mental health issues. It could be a traumatic event, such as a death of a loved one, financial loss, divorce. It could be a chemical imbalance in the brain. There's genetic predisposition, brain damage due to a head injury, chronic or ongoing medical concerns, abuse of any kind, and too much stress. So different people may have experienced the pandemic differently, and have already struggling with different mental health issues before the pandemic that were only exacerbated at this time. So it's important to recognize, to get curious, and to acknowledge that these could all be possible causes to why someone is maybe not performing at their best. So let's talk about stress awareness and evaluation. Stress is a normal part of life, and the right amounts of stress can help us focus and reach our goals. If you have a big presentation that you're preparing for, it's going to motivate you, that stress, to maybe prepare. That's a good thing. But if you have too much stress, you might notice that you're getting sick more often. You might experience a lack of focus. Your employees may be experiencing that. And when there's chronic stress that isn't managed, it can lead to more serious things. And over time, a general experience of depression, anxiety. So a stressor can be a person, it can be a place, it can be a situation that's causing you stress. And stress is the actual response to one or a combination of those stressors. So I'd love to hear in the chat box, what stressors have you faced in the last year? Or you can choose the second question, what are signs of stress that you look for in yourself and others at work or even at home? Learning how to work remotely, reduction in the ability to focus, look for employees who are not engaged, keeping everyone engaged remotely. Zoom fatigue, looking for a job. Yeah, these are all great. Working remotely, but not allowing myself to disconnect. My office is not my home, so there's no separation. Yeah, this all increases our stress. And so naming it and normalizing it, I think, is really important. There can be something like, I think sometimes people go to a place of toxic positivity, like just look on the bright side, everything's okay. And yet that doesn't really help people feel seen and heard. So it's great that you're sharing these conversations with one another. I like this visual of measuring stress, kind of thinking about a tank on a car. We have visual cues of where we are, empty or full. If we have, so here you'll notice on the y-axis is performance, and on the x-axis is stress level. When we have too little stress, in the green here, if we're inactive, maybe we're on vacation, we're laid back, that's not a bad place to be, but we're not performing right at our top peak performance. When we have optimum stress here in the yellow, we may notice slight fatigue, but we're performing at a pretty high level. When we have too much stress, though, we may start to notice exhaustion in the orange section, and then anxiety, panic, anger, breakdown in burnout. Now, do you think as a culture, as a society, we wait till we get to burnout to rest? Or do you think we're pretty good at noticing the fatigue spot, we're performing, and then we rest and recover? Feel free to put in the chat box, but I'm going to guess that a lot of us, unfortunately, wait till we get to burnout. Yes, so we need to create cultures where we say it's important to recognize when you get to that optimum stress, rest and recover, right? The goal is not to get to burnout in order to deserve a vacation. It's really important to look at what's the messaging around vacations, taking time off, mental health days, because you don't need to get to burnout in order to rest, right? And I think too often we wear busyness as a badge of honor. Not taking lunch is a badge of honor. Emailing around the clock is a badge of honor. We're in competition of who can work the most, but I don't know if that's really what we want to make as a stamp of good work. And whatever you practice, you're sending a message to others, and leaders are sending a message to others. So it's important to look at the culture there and what messages can be sent from the top about expectations and what good performance really comes from. And it's that rest and recovery. So let's just talk really briefly about the neuroscience, just to destigmatize it a little bit. Our brains are doing so much for us all the time, right? We don't see them, but they take in information through our five senses, what we hear, what we smell, what we experience through touch and taste. Our brains are doing so many things automatically. Breathing, helping us breathe, our bodies are functioning, and they're doing so much. So when there's something that's going on that's reducing our functioning over a period of time, that's when we might say that there's an underlying issue. It might be emotional, it could be physical, that's impacting our functioning day to day. But even conversations can trigger us and heighten our emotions in different situations. And maybe you noticed during the pandemic, because people were more stressed, they were more reactive, or different events that may not have triggered you before all of a sudden became very activating. The amygdala in the center of our brain is the emotional center. And when it gets kind of triggered, then we don't have access to all of our logical reasoning part of our brain. And I want to share, I'm wondering if it's not hyperlinked here. Well, doesn't look like the play button is on here. So I'm just going to tell you that you can look at Dr. Dan Siegel's like a 2-minute video on YouTube, but essentially he talks about the hand model. And if you put your hand in a fist, maybe some of you who have kids, maybe your kids have learned this at school, but essentially if my hand is a brain, in the center is the amygdala, that emotional part of our brain that can get triggered as we're taking in information as to what is safe, what is dangerous. And when we get those signals and they travel up the brain stem, we can be known to flip our lid. And what is happening in the brain is the prefrontal cortex, where we make all of our logical, rational decisions from, goes offline, and we're flooded with emotion. And so we may do things that are not in alignment with our values. The goal is to soothe our brain. Maybe it's through deep breathing, taking a walk, talking to a friend, to bring that part of the brain back online. Teenagers actually don't have that part of the brain fully developed. So they're making lots of decisions from a place of emotion. But when we have access to our logical reasoning mind, then we can make better decisions. So it's really important to help people understand how their brain works and what's happening when they get triggered, when they go into that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, what's actually happening in the brain. So it's a very short video. I basically just summarized it, but there's a lot that's going on. So let's talk a little bit about emotional intelligence. The ability to recognize what's going on inside of me, and then how can I, in judicial ways, communicate with others about it, right? So if I'm feeling angry, do I yell at my colleague, or do I say, you know what, this conversation is triggering or bringing something up for me. Let's take a time out and let's talk about it at lunch, right? So thoughts are automatic, and so they can happen so fast we may not even catch them. But we're trying to make sense of our world and always taking in information. So sometimes we create a story inside of us that is or isn't happening, and that impacts how we're feeling. So emotions are always valid. They're not good or bad. We may want to experience more of the happy, joyful, excited feelings versus feeling sad or angry. But again, they just mean that we're alive and we're taking information in and trying to survive and thrive in our worlds. So if we can get curious without judgment of what happened in the last 5 minutes that I felt really angry. Oh, I had that meeting and they didn't support my idea. So I want to go take a walk to cool down, right? Sometimes we send an angry email too fast and we're not really thinking what's happening inside of me. and let me slow down so that I can make decisions that are in alignment with my values. I really like, I don't know if anyone's recently read Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart or watched her HBO series. It's a 5-part series on emotions, but there are like 87 different words for different emotions that we experience. But when she surveyed people, there were on average 3 words that came to mind for people. It was like happy, sad, and angry. So if we don't have the language to articulate what we're experiencing, then it limits our ability to communicate with ourselves and with others. Emotional intelligence is the capacity to be aware of, control, and express your own emotions and to handle interpersonal conflict in empathetic ways. So I think that HR leaders can really focus on leaders and teaching or providing resources on emotional intelligence. Can you identify what you're experiencing and communicate it to others? This is really important work. So we could have a whole presentation just on emotional intelligence, but I want to talk a little bit about coping and self-care. Self-care is not selfish. I'm sure this is a group of helpers, and you probably do a lot for people at work, maybe people at home, but you can't pour from an empty cup. You're probably familiar when you get on a plane, they say, put your mask on before helping someone else. Why do they do that? You can put it in the chat box if you like. But, you might think, well, it's nice to put someone else first and let me help someone that's next to me. But the reality is that if you don't help yourself first and you're not breathing, that you're not going to be able to support someone else. So self-care is any activity that you do deliberately in order to take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, or physically. So asking yourself, what do I need to feel better right now is a great place to start. Self-care is not always a luxurious thing like a bubble bath or a pedicure, which I like both of those. But oftentimes it's the small things that take care of you. I want to get enough sleep tonight, or taking out the trash will make my environment smell better and I'll feel more peace in my workspace, right? So this is really important, these conversations of how are you taking care of yourself? Again, so you don't get to this place of burnout, but that you're in a place that is sustainable in the long run. So I'm curious, what does self-care look like for you? What did it look like during the pandemic? And what does it look like for you on a daily basis now? I'd love to hear in the chat box some thoughts. Yoga, daily meditation and exercise, exercise and sleep, alone time and exercise, walking a lot, yes, reading, mindfulness practice, walks, haircuts, reading, yoga. I love it. These are important conversations to have. Are your leaders having these conversations with your employees? What are you doing for self-care? How can we support each other in taking care of each other? Right? This is important. And it has a connection to the bottom line. The goal in the end is to be resilient, and resilience is not about not feeling. We don't want to numb our feelings. We want to cope in healthy ways. So if you're aware of people who are drinking, using drugs, excessive online shopping, anything that's not going to serve them in the long run, that's not about resilience and tolerating discomfort, but taking care of your ways in ways that will help you in the moment and in the long run for your well-being are really good coping strategies. So having these conversations, I think, is really important to help people get ideas. Maybe there's something you've read here that you thought, oh, I haven't been doing something like that. I think that could help me. So I want to share just a couple of case studies that come from a report that's in the Mental Health America. You can look at their websites, but there was an article put out in the last year, lists 8 employers that are supporting employee mental health during COVID-19. Certainly there are more. I'm just going to highlight a couple, but Chevron Corporation, they have a corporate-wide mental health campaign. to increase awareness and reduce stigma associated with mental health. They have self-guided resilience resources that are accessible for all employees. Culligan Water, they have one-on-one health coaching for employees. They have manager well-being calls. They have weekly well-being communications. They have live meditation sessions. They have stress management activities, morale boosting activities, and company owners spoke personally to mental health in a video communication. Ernst & Young, they've got a free 12-week course on mindfulness and daily scheduled practice sessions. They have a lot of different exercises and practical tips for managing anxiety, social isolation, and feeling overwhelmed. They also have backup adult and child care support, and that was extended and virtual yoga and workout classes. The Financial Times provides meditation through Headspace, which is an app. They've got planning for annual mental health awareness week. Verizon Media, they have virtual Q&A sessions with the CEO and guest speakers to address issues affecting mental health. They have presentations from psychiatrists and therapists, mindfulness program, and they feature stories from employees who are sharing their experiences in the hopes of sparking important conversations. So I'm curious, before I go on, if you want to put in the chat box, what are some things that your company is already doing that you think is working to support employee mental health? And maybe if there isn't something just yet, maybe there's something you want to take from here. Okay, so there's a mental health apps stipend. We did find a more robust EAP plan, great weekly meditation, working with our healthcare provider and EAP company, taking everyone on a 4-day offsite out of state, asking managers to support employees by managing priorities, not overwhelming staff. Okay, meditation, wellness, reimbursement. Okay, great. So there's some things you're already doing, some great apps. I think it starts with each one of us. I know there was a question about how can I reduce someone's anxiety? I don't know that you can do that. I think each person has to take ownership of their own life and what they're in control of. Even if a leader says we need to get these 10 projects done, each person has to decide what boundaries they're going to set and how they're going to communicate. So of course, leaders have a role in that, in taking care of their people, but ultimately someone has to decide to take care of themselves. So providing resources and education is a really big part of what HR, I think, can do so that people know how they can take care of themselves, how they can set boundaries, how to have these open conversations. But being vulnerable and giving others a chance to be open, I think, starts the conversation. So I'm curious if your organizations have had facilitated conversations or trainings, because as I've done more of these trainings to companies, people said, oh, it's so nice to be real and to say this has been hard, right? Because we've been more isolated, especially if you're on Zoom. Is there a space to process and as leaders, as employees, do they feel heard? I think that can alleviate some stress and pressure of feeling like I have to keep this to myself. So if you're modeling healthy behaviors and you encourage leadership to do the same, that's going to start kind of a ripple effect. Building a culture with check-ins, offering flexibility with changing schedules, bringing trainings to open dialogue around mental health to provide education for a shared cultural language, sharing EAP resources, or allowing flexibility for employees to see a therapist or a psychiatrist regularly, and choosing healthcare plans with good mental health benefits, or just some things to consider as a next step. So we've covered a lot of territory, and I've been so appreciative of all the responses in the chat box. I'm curious, what's resonated with you today, and what are you taking with you? You can put that in the chat box. The importance of trainings around this topic, yes. The importance of self-care. Yes, taking away some of these apps and other ideas shared. Great. Other work environments are experiencing the same employee challenges. You are not alone. Great examples of what other companies are doing. Yes. Can you be a trendsetter as well? Giving people an opportunity to speak about their mental health challenges. Yeah, people want to talk about it, especially younger generations are more comfortable and will feel seen and heard. We all have the same concerns. Self-care is critical. Yes. Again, we can't control anyone else but ourselves. So it really starts with you, which is hopefully a hopeful sentiment that you are not responsible to figure all of this out, but to provide resources and take care of you. Great. And again, I've provided an appendix of other apps, books, resources, even a self-care plan. These are some things I'll use in trainings with people to really take the time to reflect on what is my self-care, what is my plan. Sometimes we're just going and we don't have time, we don't make time to reflect, to breathe. So a lot of that is just kind of samplings of some things I incorporate with clients. Okay, great. Well, I'm curious what I might not have touched on or what questions I could answer in the last few minutes we have together. Feel free to put it in the chat box.
Caitlin, a question that has come up is identifying ways that we can provide employees that safe space. I know there are a lot of different, as we'd said, a lot of different apps and things that we've shared today and that you've talked about, but are there ways that as HR professionals, we can provide that safe space so an employee does feel comfortable to step forward if they are having difficulty and perhaps don't feel comfortable speaking up?
Sure. Well, so I think definitely letting them know what resources are available. Again, you're not responsible for being their therapist, but sharing the resources and again, facilitating conversations about this, bringing in a facilitator is a great way to kind of normalize it a little bit. If someone's feeling worried about it, but there's education that we want you to come ask us for a flexible schedule so you can see a therapist, it's okay to ask for those things. But if there hasn't been that communication, people just might not know what will happen, right? So letting them know you're not going to be fired. We want to make sure you have the support. We don't want you to burn out. We want you, these are the ways we want to support you. If there's something else we can do, let us know. Maybe you have a box or a place that they can send questions, right? But they have to know that it's going to feel safe. So telling them that you want them to have those conversations. And again, just creating that company culture, whether it's trainings, whatever it might be, to have that general language, I think are some ways. But people can certainly put any other ideas of what's working for them in the chat box. Okay, there's a question. Are some resources or apps more popular for specific generations? Oh, that's a great question. You know what? I don't know specifically about generations, but yeah, I think you can look at reviews of top apps. I know that Headspace is a really popular one. Calm is a really popular one. So I would just look at the ratings, but I think, most of us have a smartphone, so as long as it can guide someone, it's probably going to be a fit for most people. Someone asked, will we have access to the review of the presentation? Yes, I believe that was sent out.
I will include that with the summary I send out. Looks like also there was another question about how to talk to management about implementing some of the examples that you've talked about.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think it's putting together some programming or have a facilitator come and talk about these ideas and then have them create a plan. What do they want to implement? So I think there just needs to be training, and that may come from you, or you may outsource it. Someone put here in the chat for those that would like to add this program to their, recertification. I hope that answers your question. Again, I think there needs to be a bigger program versus, one email is probably not going to do it. Some education and some goal setting perhaps around it. When I've facilitated 4 leaders, they talk amongst themselves, in a Zoom about what they're doing. And then there's more buy-in. Oh, like you're doing that. Oh, I see this works well on my team. Oh, I hadn't thought about that. So a lot of exchange of ideas. So if there's a place that can be creative for them to share best practices, I think that's a great way to have those conversations. Good question. Other questions? Okay.
Caitlin, thank you so much. I think we have covered so many different areas and able to cover it in a way that really gives us some different tools that we can take back and different ways that we can apply this within our own organizations. So certainly, thank you so very much for that. And as I said, I will certainly make sure to send the slides out, as well as a lot of our responses in chat have been great, so that everybody has those examples, and certainly what other organizations are doing, because I think we learn so much from each other. But thank you again, Caitlin, for joining us, and thank you everybody for joining us today. And we hope everybody has a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. It was great to connect. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.